we're going to be checking in on kind of the ecosystem of EVs, and we have an expert on the subject today, Tom Moloughney.
Thanks for having me on the show.
I don't know if you know the history of just like how, going from horse and buggy to the automobile, right? It would be interesting to see what the pushback was against automobiles at the time.
Yeah, I agree. Anything that is that disruptive, of a technology, there's going to be resistance. We're creatures of habit. We don't like change. As much as we say we're open to change, we really don't. We're not. Let's face it. Who likes buying gasoline? Think about it. Who likes pulling up to a gas station and getting gas? So then why are people so reluctant to let go of that and move into something as easy as plugging in? Because, it's the devil they know. They're used to it. They're comfortable with it. Nobody likes buying gas. And I'm sure that was the case back with horses. There were people that didn't want to give up their trusty horse because, well, their dad used a horse, their grandfather used a horse. It worked for them. It gets them from point A to point B. It doesn't cost that much to run. You buy some hay, so, there was a quote from Henry Ford, and it's never been proven if he actually said this, but I hope he said it because it's kind of cool. When he said, if I would have asked people of my time what they wanted me to produce, as far as personal transportation, they would have said, build me a faster horse. They would have never said, make the Model T or make this mechanical horse thing, a horseless carriage. But, he knew that if he made it and he made it right, people would prefer it. And it's like that with electric vehicles. Once we iron out some of the details we have now, infrastructure, charging speeds, cost is a big barrier right now. Once we get all that down, and it's all going to iron itself out in the next few years, then people are just naturally going to prefer electric vehicles because, like the Model T was to the horse, it's a better mode of transportation.
But let's talk about batteries, because, it's like there is a lot of question with the batteries, right? How long these batteries have to live, their life. And also the kind of the disposal of these batteries. And on top of that, if one of these batteries catches on fire, right? You're hearing about these fires that you can't put out with these electric car batteries.
Yeah, true. And so there's a lot there. Let's first talk about the fires because you brought that up.
We're looking at how I'd like to look at just both sides, right? It's like how amazing these vehicles are, but there are some drawbacks, and I'm just curious to hear your side of that.
Yeah, you absolutely should look at the drawbacks. Nothing's perfect, and these things don't run on unicorn farts. They electricity does need to be made somewhere. So it's it's not it's zero tailpipe emission, but not true zero emission unless, like me, you're plugging into your house where this electric's being made by your solar array. But let's talk about the fire. So statistically, electric cars catch on fire less often than gas cars. Statistically, if you look at, you get the raw data on how many electric cars are on the market, how many fires they have. But the problem is, whenever an electric car is on fire, it's in the news. There is hundreds, maybe thousands of gas car fires every day. How many times you drive down the highway, there's a big flames coming out. So statistically, they're safer. And yes, they are harder to put out in a fire. So first responders have to understand how to do this. It's interesting. There's a company in Europe making this fire truck where it's just a truck with almost a big like bathtub in the back that they pull, and it's filled with water. And it's so cool when you pull up to the fire, if it's an electric car fire, like a crane comes out, picks the car up and drops it in the back, and it's submerged under like 8 feet of water.
God,
and it leaves it there for like a couple of, it drives somewhere, parks, and then the next day it lifts the thing out and it's done. So there's no fighting the fire. Nobody sees. I think that's a cool concept.
That's
in any event,
interesting.
But the one thing I will say about electric car fires is when a gas car goes on fire, it can flame out pretty quickly. Like, if it's a really bad accident, you slide into a tree, it can pretty much engulf the car in flames pretty quickly. That doesn't happen with electric cars. When there's an electric car battery fire, typically, first of all, you get tons of warnings, the alerts go off and everything. You'll pull over and get out, even if it's a bad accident, unless you're incapacitated, if you're passed out. the car will smolder. Maybe one of the battery modules will go on fire before it catches to other ones. Typically, you have a lot more time to get out of an electric car fire than you do a gas car fire. So that's just a little point there. So let's move on from the fires. Let's talk about battery life. You also asked me about that. So we're getting a lot of data now from electric cars that have been on the road for a very long time. And we're finding out that the batteries are even lasting longer than we expected they would. Now, with electric car batteries, it's not like one day, boom, the battery doesn't work. Like, with a gas engine, the engine seizes and you need a new engine, for whatever reason. With batteries, they just slowly degrade. So you get a new car that can go 325 miles. Maybe in 10 years, it can only go 250 miles per charge. But it doesn't mean that you can't use a battery anymore. You just need to recharge it more frequently. And we have electric cars on the road now that have 200, 300,000, even more than 400,000 miles on the original battery packs. It's just they don't go as far as they used to. What we typically talk about as end of life in automotive use for batteries is when they're at 70% of their capacity. So let's say electric vehicle can go 300 miles when it's new. When it's down to 210 miles, that means it's kind of end of life, somewhere around there. And then they don't go to landfills. These batteries are still extremely useful because don't forget, they still have 70% of their original capacity. Right. What happens is there's going to be second uses for the batteries. There's companies now that are forming partnerships with OEMs to buy these battery packs. A lot of those companies are utilities for stationary energy storage. They'll pile hundreds of these batteries together in a warehouse, and they'll use it to balance the electric load. So it'll kind of be like a giant battery backup for a city or a town. And then also private companies are buying them and they're repackaging them for stationary energy storage in your house. They'll sell you a used battery pack, and you'll use it as a backup for when you have a power outage at your house. So the batteries are going to be used for at least 10 more years after they come out of a car and they're considered end of life for automotive use. Eventually, they'll be recycled. They don't end up in landfills because they have materials inside, lithium, manganese, the things that have value. So upwards of 90% of the battery pack will actually be recycled.
Do you see new EV companies emerging during this whole movement, or do you think it's just going to be the kind of the top players and then existing manufacturers just converting to electric?
So electrification has opened up the opportunity for startups. If you notice, there were no startups with conventionally fueled vehicles. Think about it. Right. Do you know when the last U.S. automaker started and succeeded? Do you have any idea when that was and who that was?
No. Who would it be? No. When it's Saturn?
Yeah, no, that was a division of General Motors. That wasn't really a new automaker, So Chrysler, and I think it was 1928. So that's the last time. 1928 was the last time we had like a traditional automaker start and succeed, not fail after a few years. But think about what's happened now with electrification. You've got Tesla, Lucid, Rivian. Now, we don't know if they're all going to last 50 years, but what we have is this wave of new electric vehicle manufacturers. And that's just in the US, you've got all these amazing amount of startups in China, a crazy amount of startups. I've been over there quite a few times. I've driven their cars. I've seen their manufacturing facilities. China is going to be an incredible powerhouse on the world stage with electric vehicles. You notice they never really were able to do it with gasoline vehicles. None of their vehicles were really that good. They couldn't compete globally. But with electrification, it's going to be different. And then we have European startups, TOG, we have VinFast. There's a bunch of companies that are coming out of nowhere. And that's possible because of electrification, because the hardest thing to make with the conventionally fueled vehicles was the motors and transmissions, and the electric powertrains are so much simpler. It's like this electric motor, a big battery, and a controller. And it's like, that's it, So, I mean, I've oversimplified it a little bit, but it's allowing startups to happen. And that's great for the industry because they're starting with a clean sheet of paper. Traditional OEMs, it's almost impossible for them to not look at what they've done all these years and create something completely new. They're really good at making incremental improvements on their existing products. They're not good at saying, let's just not even look at our existing cars. What would the car of the future be like? And make it. That's what the startups are doing. And that's an advantage they have in electrification. They're coming up with new, unique ideas that the legacy OEMs haven't been able to do yet. They may be able to, but that's why the startups seem to have such compelling products. I mean, the Rivian R1T pickup truck's an amazing truck. The Lucid Air is a fantastic long-range, high-performance sedan, and we all know what Tesla's been doing. So, it's the startups actually have a good chance of making it. Now, they're all not going to succeed, but I think we're going to see quite a few of them succeed.
Awesome, Tom. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Thanks for having me.